Hi, welcome to Steve's Wood Cave. This is the WoodRat 900, which I bought in about 2000, so it's quite old now. It's basically a routing machine. It's not a dovetail only guide or jig, so it can do dovetails. It can do many things, in fact, comb joints, sliding dovetails, blind dovetails, mouldings, hinges, stopped housings, what else, mortises and tenons. It does very nice clean tenons, and all types of manner of dovetails and anything really. It's a 3D milling machine, so if you've done any metal work in your life, then you've seen these big metal cast iron machines for metal work. This is operating on a similar principle, but obviously much cheaper thing. So it has an aluminium extrusion here, which is in the form of an eye shape when you look down the end of it. So it's got hollows in behind here. There's a sliding bar here which is turned by this handle, and this moves the workpiece left and right. And you'll probably notice there's another clamp on the left here. So the workpiece is clamped in the cutter position here on the right, and you can put a workpiece that you've already cut with the bit in this side and transfer the cut that you've made through that piece of wood onto the face of the WoodRat. Backwards and forwards is done through the router sliding on this router plate here. The router plate is channeled by these two white plastic guide rails, and these are bolted to this larger plate which is called the base plate. Between the base plate and the body, the aluminium body of the WoodRat, are these two MDF spacers. You can fit them or not fit them, fit just one or two. I've got two fitted here. It depends on the thickness of your workpiece that you're putting through the machine, so that's something that you'll learn by using it. Oh yeah, on the WoodRat you can buy these plunge bars which allow you to heighten your bit accurately. So you just squeeze it and then set it to the height and lock it off. And actually I use these in the router table. I never take these plunge bars off, even if I'm using it freehand actually. Never put the old handles back on the side. So these plunge bars are an additional extra cost, but I think they're very good. Well worth getting if you haven't got any. So I'll get on to a few more details now. But if you've looked at woodrat.com website, that will tell you obviously a hell of a lot more about how many different joints it can cut. But it can literally do anything. That's a brief introduction to the WoodRat. It's a fantastic machine, and you can add all sorts of jigs to it of your own. So you know, the sky's the limit really with how to cut pieces of wood with this. And of course you can put all sorts of different router bits in your router to create those joints or cuts. So yeah, it's a very versatile jig, and I think far more versatile than the dedicated dovetail jig. So yeah, there you go. So we'll go through how to set it up, what the problems are that you might face, maintenance, things like that. And then, but once it clicks in your head, you'll suddenly realise the power of the machine. But it does take a little bit of learning, so hopefully this video will get you started. Alright, here we go. In order to mount the machine, we just mount it on this piece of pine that you can see at the back here. It stretches right the way across the back. The body sits on it. There's another piece of wood which you can't see that's just inside here and at the other end, and that creates like a lip for the top end of the machine body to sit in. So it creates a slot that it just falls into. So you can lift this whole aluminium body straight up and off. When you buy one new, it's very easy to do. You get full instructions. and I think nowadays you get 2 metal clamps that you can screw, and that creates this this lip for it to hang on. So I think even with the modern rat, it's much easier to hang, and also you can also hang it on your bench. You could make a box for it to sit on, so it doesn't have to go on a wall. So yeah, it's a very easy task to hang it up. Once you've got it on the wall, then it's just a question of working out what height to mount it at. You can make this wooden support as big as you like. You can bring it away from the wall so you don't have it. I've purposefully pushed it against the wall because I don't want to, I've got quite a narrow workshop, so I don't want to push this out any further. In fact, when I'm not using this base plate and the router and everything all hangs up on the wall here on the tool board, so that really opens up my narrow shop. Another thing you need to check is when you're going to screw this piece of pine to the wall, you obviously want to set the height. Now, depending on how tall you are, you might prefer the top of the main body of the rat to be lower or higher than I've got it here. This is set to 1330 millimeters or 52.5 inches approximately. Actually, in use, I have found sometimes that this is too high. I've got a metal toolbox under here that I stand on so I can look down, because sometimes the actual gap in the router plate, the base plate, is quite narrow and you can't see what's going on, especially when you're at full plunge or close to full plunge. It closes up the hole and you can't really see, so I usually use one of these spotlights, LED spotlights, to get in there and light up what's happening inside. So sometimes routing is a little bit blind. So yeah, make sure you decide. I mean, you can always change it later, of course, but mount it, because the limitation is if you set the height of this too low, then you can only put short pieces of wood into this clamp here. So normally that's where your wood goes. Oops, my finger. I'll just clamp that in like that. This is now in what's called the cutter position, and as you can imagine, the lower the actual body of the WoodRat is to the floor, the shorter the piece of wood is that you can put in there in a vertical position. Not every cut you do on a WoodRat is held with a piece of wood like this, so it doesn't stop you from doing everything. But let's say you want to dovetail the top end of this board, you're going to be limited by. Now, I suppose you could get a step ladder and mount it high up on the wall, on the outside of your house or anywhere you like, but hey, strange things have happened. So it's up to you. So one of the things that you'll find is that when you first get it out of the box, it may be that when you've opened it for the first time, or you haven't used it for a long period of time, you need to check this Bowden cable tension. So hopefully you can see in behind the machine here. Here you can see the main body of the WoodRat and its sort of eye-shaped extrusion. So you've got a cavity at the back and a cavity at the front, and the one at the front is where the sliding bar moves backwards and forwards when you turn the handle. Now, with this bar, sometimes when you turn the handle, it gets very juddery. So sort of go dink, 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 dink as you turn it. So it should be smooth. As I'm rotating the handle, it should move really smoothly backwards and forwards. It's not doing that. And you need to look at this cable here, which hopefully you can just about see. I'm pulling it out. Now we're at the right hand end of the WoodRat extrusion. You can see the sliding bar coming out here. You can see this wire. This is the end of the Bowden cable, which is attached to this bolt, and there's a nut behind here and an Allen key head in the front face of this sliding bar. So to tighten it, obviously you need to undo this, pull it, and tighten it up again. The back here is where I push it in. I should be able to just touch the face of this back face of the sliding bar. But again, it's all you know if you've got the right tension in the cable, because as you wind the handle it should be smooth. If it's not smooth, then you know you've got to adjust this. You just need an Allen key or hex key to adjust it at the front. Okay, I'm going to take the router off here now. So this, as you can see, is attached to this what we might as well call the router plate. It replaces the base of your router, so if you have a plastic router plate already on your router, you need to remove it. I'll talk about this in a bit more detail later. But we'll just move this out of the way for now. This is called the base plate, and it has these white plastic guides for guiding the router plate. You can also buy these aluminium guide rails. They're a bit more sophisticated, less flexible, so you get a much better. Unfortunately, for some weird reason, I don't have long enough bolts. WoodRat didn't provide long enough bolts to go through the two extension MDF boards and the base plate and the thickness of this aluminium slide, so I couldn't use these slides for this particular cut that I was doing the other day, so that's why they're hanging up here. But anyway, you can buy these, and I usually have these fitted because they're actually, there is another thing. This has a T-slot in it. Both the left and the right hand side has a T-slot, so that when it's on here you can actually, I've got a smaller version of this ruler with a hole in the end, but basically I can put a bolt through here with a wing nut and screw it on top, and I can use this as a backwards and forwards guide. It'll tell me how many millimetres I've moved it. But anyway, that's something else to think about later on. One of the other things with the sliding bar is that there can be some play. So when you first get this, you probably want to do this first, in fact, before you do the Bowden cable. But if there's any play like this, you can wheel it out to the left as far as it will go, or even, yeah, let's do it there. And then just get a flat blade screwdriver, lift up the top white plastic, find it, lift it up so it's out of its channel. Just reposition the camera so you can see this. So I've basically got a screwdriver, put it in the end, and just lifted it up and out of its slot. Okay. So now what we do is we wind it in, and it will push. I mean, there is actually one underneath as well, but you never have to actually take that one out. Only the top one. Wind it in, and then continue to the other end so it comes out of the other side. Again, put the screwdriver in, prise it open, give it a clean. It's amazing how much dirt you can pick up. So again, lift it right out and then wind it back in again, and you should hear it click into position. Another thing you can do is you can use this silicone lubricant, which you can get from WoodRat, and just give the glide a bit of a spray. That will ease silicone lubricant you can spray on here, and also on the bottom of, same on the other side. Put the same on this side. Still some play there, but maybe that's as good as it gets. It's not too bad. Anyhow, if you've got problems with it moving too much, then that's what you need to do. It may be that my white plastic strips have worn because it's quite old now. So maybe that's something I need to look into to replace those. But anyway, that's the technique. So inside here, where the router cutter normally sits, inside the body of the WoodRat is a folded piece of aluminium dust chute, it's called, and that sits in there to suck all that out, all the dust. This is a dust extraction point which extracts only from that area. And of course, sometimes when you're routing on this side, it's not going to catch anything coming out the back. So I tend to use the dust extraction on the actual router. It's more effective because it extracts it straight from the bit. So these days I don't really use this. I suppose I could couple it up with a Y connector. But when you build this pine support, you're supposed to drill a hole, which I have done, and glue in a plastic plumbing pipe and create a cavity at the back there. They give you some blocks of polystyrene, some blocks of polystyrene in there to block the actual extrusion hole. Start with the base plate. We need to fix this to the body of the WoodRat, the main aluminium extrusion. 90% of all the work done uses the second slot. There are 3 positions here for these bolts that attach it to the body. There's P3, P2 and P1. And they say that 90% of all the work uses the second slot. It doesn't make a huge difference. All this does is it pulls it forward or backwards. Although I've got it set to position 3, it's not going to it didn't make a great deal of difference for what I was doing the other day, which was just mortising a piece of wood. But anyway, for the most part, you could leave it connected in the P2 position. So all you do is, to square it up, when you first put it together, is get the bolts in roughly right, almost tight, and then what you need to do, well, that is the P2 position. So we need to have this square relative to the front face of the body of the rat. In order to do that, if you use the P2 position, P3 and P2, these bolts go between those 2 positions. So that's P3, that's P2. If you want P1, you have to take the bolts out, both of them out and into these single holes. But they're only required for through dovetail work, so I wouldn't worry about those at this stage. Most of the stuff can be done with the P2 position, and as I said, if you push against the cap head bolts, and they're almost tight. Of course, the other thing is you have to decide whether you need these MDF spacer blocks. So WoodRat provide these shaped pieces of MDF which basically higher this base plate or lower it depending on whether you fit them or not. So there's 2 of them fitted at the moment. I had a 35mm piece of oak that I was passing through under here the other day, and because of where this clamp fence fits, you've only got about 33mm from the top of that fence to the top of the body of the rat. So I had to push this up to allow my piece of wood to go through. I needed 2 of them because I was using a horizontal jig, and anyway, I'll show you that later, but that's why I've got 2 here. But depending on what you're cutting, you have to decide what you're going to do. So maybe it's best just to leave 2 in. Push this back to P2. That should automatically square it up to the face of the plate. So square in this direction. Difficult to do now when you've got these 2 in here. It's very hard to reference off the body of the rat, but if I do it at a slight angle like that, it seems square. It's one of the downsides of it, but that's what they tell you to do. So then lightly tighten these one by one. Also make sure that the front of these MDF spacer blocks are not overlapping and in front of this face like that. Make sure they're behind, slightly behind, so that you should be able to feel that. If in doubt, get a piece of wood and check that there's a gap. So that should be square now. In the P2 position, pushed it all the way back so that it's against these cap head bolts. And everything should be square. So when you first get the machine, you won't have these are called clamp fences or cam clamps. There's 2. There's one on the right here that you've seen. This is called the cutter position, and the one on the left is called the marker position. Basically, when you get the machine, it won't have these on. It won't have these on. So rather than take everything off to show you now, I'll just describe the order. So you start with the left hand marker position one. You place it on there. You get a couple of bolts that come with the machine. A hex, medium hex key for this. Just put them in loosely for now because we need to square it up. We'll check for square first. There are countersunk holes, so right. So there's 2 things we need to check. We need to check if it's square in this direction and also in this direction, which it wasn't. So I'm just going to carefully tighten this up now. It should be square. If it's really not good, then you need to phone WoodRat and talk to them about it. So check that's square. If you've got any problems with squareness, you can shim out behind the bolts to adjust the angle of the plate this way or that way. And then in this direction from the top of the body, it's just a question of getting these in the countersink holes in the correct place. So you do that, then you slide on this cam clamp. This is it's got a cam shape, and that's for tightening a piece of wood in this left hand side. Left hand cam clamp. Then you fix the next one, the right hand one. Same thing again. Use the squares to check it. Oh, and also another thing you need to check is the squareness to the top of the underside of this base plate. So now I'm checking this vertical right hand face of the left hand cam clamp against the underside of the base plate. Again, you can slacken the screws and adjust it, but that all seems fine, and it should be fine. You shouldn't have too many troubles with that. I've never had a problem. I've never had to shim them. So the order is this one, then slide the first cam clamp on, then fit and square up the cutter position cam clamp fence, and finally slide on the right hand one. These just come off. Normally they come off, but I've actually got an extra gadget on there that I'd have to remove. So, but they do slide off if I remove that. So then onto the router plate. I think I showed it to you earlier. So you've got the router already fitted onto this one, of course. But when you get it brand new, there's no holes drilled in it for your router, but there are partially pre-drilled holes for the ELU 177 or DW625. This is a DeWalt DW625, and the ELU 96 routers, which of course are all quite old now, but I think a lot of modern routers, correct me if I'm wrong, I think a lot of them are based on those old models. But in any case, if they're not, you'll have to make a template from your router plate that comes with your router. This is the one for this one. It's quite thin, D-shaped. I didn't need to use this at all, but what you could do on yours, if the holes are not pre-drilled for your router, take your router plate off, use this as a template, overlay it onto a piece of paper and trace around it and mark where the actual holes are, and then transfer that somehow onto the back of this very carefully. It's vital, absolutely vital, that you screw your router to this plate. It's the most critical bit. The bit has to be central to this channel. Otherwise you're going to have problems with doing through dovetails later on. So it absolutely has to be central. If you can afford it, or you don't have one of these, it's a pretty good router, good value for money really. The DeWalt DW625 UK. It's perfectly good enough for this WoodRat. So that's the router plate, and it's very important to get that right. So once you've drilled through these two holes, then you can obviously screw it to your router. From there, as I showed you before, you've got these white plastic slide guides, slides onto there. With the centre plate, which has this orange plastic part in it. I think it's actually quite different now in the new WoodRat, but essentially it's doing the same thing. So this is used for marking out the angles. You get rid of these white sort of 90-degree guide rails for this, and then you put these spirals on the left. So this is a spiral, on the right. But basically these white rails disappear, and then you slide in this thing. You have to push the router back a bit because the channel changes width, and then you can set the angle that this router plate rotates at, and that's set by this orange thing here, and you can set how many degrees that it's going to move. So you have to first check that it's going to fit into this slot when the machine's new and you get it out of the box. This might not fit in at all, might be too tight, or it will fit in and it's too tight and it won't slide. It needs to be able to slide up and down. So all you do is just sand it very lightly with some sandpaper, and you should be alright. Don't go mad. Don't use severe grit. Start with a very fine grit and just work your way in until it fits. So that's the centre plate. We'll come on to that in later videos. There's also this thing, which is a piece of perspex with a projected part, which has a line in that you have to go over with a pen. There's a little slot in there, but it's best to highlight it with a dark pen. That slides into this centre plate as well, and that's for finding the centre. Something else that is quite useful sometimes. Again, it can go in both ways. Overlay on top of your piece of wood, and you can find the centre. Final thing you need to do is place one of these small orange plastic caps in the back of the main base plate, and that stops the router from going any further back. There is another one in the box, I think, that goes at the front to stop it coming forward to about there, which is useful for some things, but I've never used it, I don't think. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video about the introduction, setup and maintenance of the WoodRat. I hope I've shown you a few useful tips and tricks for setting it up and at least eliminating any of those issues that I mentioned. Also, it should enable you to see a little bit about what it can do, but I'll move on to that in future videos so that you can see exactly why the machine is so useful. So thank you very much, and see you next time.